Welcome to How to Influence Policymakers in California and Beyond, a workshop led by Marj Plumb. Also, we want to acknowledge that SF Bay PSR is located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco area. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about San Francisco Bay Physicians for Social Responsibility. SF Bay PSR mobilizes health professionals and advocates to promote public policies that support solutions and to the intertwined public and environmental health emergencies posed by nuclear weapons and militarism, our accelerating climate crisis, and the deep injustices rooted in structural inequity and racism. To learn more about events, resources, and how you can take action or donate, visit our website at SF Bay PSR, sign up for our newsletter, events, and action alerts, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. During the event tonight, please post your questions in the chat. Marj will be answering questions during the talk and at the end. And now I'm honored to introduce SF Bay PSR's Executive Director, Marj Plumb. Marj has contributed extensively to the pursuit of social justice by training others in public policy advocacy. Marj's training programs have reached thousands of participants, including community advocates, scientists, public health professionals, and clinicians, creating hundreds of new laws and administrative changes in California and throughout the US. Marj, I hand the mic to you.
Thank you, Julie, so much. It's so great to work with you, and I'm so glad to be back with Physicians for Social Responsibility. I am going to share my screen and get started with the training. Also, so lovely to see so many folks here who I have trained before. So hopefully all of this will be just a little bit of a reminder. And one second, of course. Okay. It's so easy. Zoom is so easy. I need a 10-year-old sitting next to me, pushing the buttons for me. Okay,
Got
here
it.
we go.
It looks
I
good.
got it. All right. So agenda introductions, keep putting your own introductions in. Love to hear who's here and where you're from, and anything you wish about why you're here or what you hope to get out of this. I'm going to present on how a bill becomes a law. I'm going to talk about how the budget is passed every year, and then we'll get a little bit of insight into the next webinar. As Julie said, I've had 40 years of nonprofit management experience. A lot of times folks, when they hear that I'm executive director of a nonprofit, they're like, you're not consulting or coaching EDs anymore? And I'm like, no, I can run nonprofits and do other things. So I'm also the executive director of Maine PSR. I just took on that chapter and I'm very excited to work with Physicians for Social Responsibility, a great group of clinicians and scientists and health advocates working together. So I have been teaching public policy for a very long time. Some of you are actually from the Women's Policy Institute, which is a program that I developed and ran for a number of years. I also created the Black to the Future Public Policy Institute for Alicia Garza, and that's been running now. It's in its third year. Coalition for a Strong Nebraska is a program that I ran, training program I ran for about 6 years. And then I also developed and ran a training program for UCSF called Reach the Decision Makers that was for coalitions of clinicians, researchers, and community members. through the Solis, it's now called the Solis Policy Institute, rather than the Women's Policy Institute. I ran that for 16 years, trained over 480 participants, and who passed 40 laws during those 16 years, including in areas such as criminal justice, environmental justice, reproductive justice, and economic justice. I myself led or mentored significant legislation back in 2001 when I started working on state legislation with the California Breast Cancer Treatment Program, that's now a $40 million program in California. And then recently, and some of you were from this effort, the Campus Action for Reproductive Equity, which was to make sure that student health centers at the UC and CSU campuses carried medication abortion. That bill passed, and all of the student health centers will be providing medication abortion by the end of this year. So I sometimes refer to my experiences during this training. So those two programs may come up. So again, if you're just logging in, put in the chat who you are, what you do, and why you're here, and I will continue on. So first thing I want to say about this presentation is that it is purely didactic. So if you came thinking this was going to be an experiential experience or interactive experience, this part is not. It really is about how a bill becomes a law, what committees bills go through, how you can access those committees, how you can access state resources to understand how to pass laws. Just know that I'm going to talk for an hour. And when you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Julie will also keep track of them for me. The training is also really kind of organized towards you're going to run your own bill. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that you should. And the other is that I think being a good advocate for other organizations' bills is enhanced by you knowing what's happening and what comes next in the legislative process. The third thing, and I need to remember to add this to the slide, I did not develop this legislative system. I did not develop how a bill becomes a law. My people did. It was based on the way that England created its own legislature, really copied from that. If I were to create a way for us to have rules about how we operate as neighbors in communities, I would not use this process in the least. And so when I'm talking about the ways that the system, that you can impact the system, the way that the system controls what's happening, please do not hear that as, wow, Marj is really supportive of the shenanigans in Sacramento, because that is not true. I want you to know how this works, so that you can take care of the needs of your community. And then hopefully someday when more of us know how this works, we can change it and make it more inclusive. So the focus for tonight is going to be on California State and on the California State Legislature. There's a couple of things I want you to know about California. It's huge. So, impacting California is really, it's like throwing a pebble in the ocean. It is really a huge entity. It is over 200 agencies. It is over 1,000 departments, boards, commissions. The state budget is over $280 billion and growing. The state economy is over $3 trillion. It's the 5th largest economy in the world. If California was its own country, it would be the 5th largest country, economy-wise in the world. And lots of people work for the state, over 260,000 state personnel. And so, just keep in mind as we are talking about how do we get a bill passed, that is within the construct of literally one of the largest corporations that's ever been developed, right? California is significant. So, what are the four targets for public policy advocacy? So, one is the legislature, and that's what we're going to talk about. One is the administration. When I talk about administration, I'm talking about the governor, the executive branch, which are overseeing of the agencies and departments in the government, the judiciary or courts. I'm not going to be addressing that, but that's a whole other area of ways of impacting public policy. And then the public through initiatives. And that's, a great way to get laws passed with the people themselves voting. It's also a way for people with ulterior motives to get laws passed that aren't very helpful, and in fact hurt our communities. So California has an initiative process that is not that can be manipulated in ways that are not really helpful. So when I say policymakers, I actually don't just mean legislators. I do mean legislators. They are the group that votes for things. But I also mean staff. When I say policymakers, I mean staff. The legislators all have office staff in Sacramento. I mean them. The agency people have staff. So there's staff in, Department of Health and Human Services, that type of thing. And there are committees that your bills go through, and the committees also have staff. So when I say policymakers, I actually mean all of them. And I also include the governor and the agencies and departments that the governor controls and runs. So think broadly when you hear policymaker. Some caveats about the California legislature. First is California has a full-time legislature. Lots of states have part-time. If you can believe it, Texas has a part-time legislature that only meets every other year. I think Texas legislators should work a little harder given the problems that they've created. But I don't know, maybe it's good that they're not in office all the time. But California is a full-time legislature, which means you can pretty much always talk to staff who are pretty much always in their offices all year long. You can pretty much always reach legislators even after the session is over. They are still legislators and still working full-time. Some of the words you're going to hear when legislators are running a bill, they're called authors. Again, that's different in other states. Sometimes they're called sponsors in other states, that type of thing. But in California, they're called authors. There's also like co-authors on bills, that type of thing. Organizations are called sponsors. If you agree to sponsor a bill, it's usually a bill that you introduced, you asked the legislator to introduce, and then there's also supporters and also, of course, opposition. The legislature itself is set up in a 2-year session, and that session begins the first Monday in an odd year. So we're currently in an even year, 2022. January starts an odd year, 2023, and the first Monday in 2023 will begin the 2-year California state legislative session. Bills can be held from that first year, 2023, and then heard again or continued in the process in 2024. So, again, you're getting action alerts from people and, writing a letter, sending an email, calling your legislator. Hopefully this gives you a sense of, what's going on, where people are, where the bill is, that type of thing. The other thing in California and most states, majority vote wins. In California, if it's an urgency bill or a bill with a tax increase, that requires a 2/3 vote of the legislature, and a 2/3 vote required to override a veto. So take a look at this slide, and if a couple of you or all of you can come out of mute, I'd love to hear some thoughts on this. And while you're looking at this, I want to know what you think about this. What does this mean in terms of advocates? Great question in the chat. Can bills be introduced in the second year as well? They can, in fact, be introduced in the second year. So you can introduce bills in the first year, and you can introduce bills in the second year. So anybody off chat, what do you think what is this image? What does this mean? Yep. Of course I hit, there you go. Bob?
It looks like blue would be Democrats, red would be Republicans. That's my first hit on it. Reflective that we have all these blue votes, and why are we in the mess we are?
There you go. Others, what are you seeing?
Hi, this is Ariane. I'm saying the same thing that he's saying. I always see blue is Democrat and red is Republican. And also the same question is like, why if there's so many blue Democratic legislators, why are we still screwed up here? You know, you know, not to rant or anything, but I think we had a pretty good conversation before, Marj. You know, I'm glad to see you. Things have been moving pretty rapidly per our conversation. However, you know, just getting enforcement. I mean, and you know, we have a lot of environmental issues, and Baby Hunter's point retaining, and a lot of it is that California has some laws. However, they're not enforcing them. You know,
enforcement is a whole other bag of worms, let me tell you. So Bob and Ariana, you're absolutely correct. Blue is Democrat, red is Republican. The little gray dot is undecided, I guess, is unaffiliated with either Dems or Republicans. Look at the large amount of blue also means that the Democrats control 2/3 of both houses. 2/3 of both the Senate and the Assembly. So if the Democrats wanted to, they could pass tax increases. If they wanted to, they could override governor vetoes, right? This is what's meant by a trifecta. Senate, Assembly, and governor are all blue, but the power is really in the Senate and the Assembly. So why don't they do that? Take a look at what's below each of those lines. Term limits. This is at least what the politicians say. They have to be able to run for office and get elected again and again and again. So you know, the idea, especially if you look at the Assembly, you know, they're capped at 3 2-year terms. The minute an Assembly person hits the Sacramento, they are raising money and running for election again. So you know, what we have is a tremendous amount of power. We have a lot of what's called moderate Dems. So they are not as progressive as many of us on the phone. And they control a lot of the power of how to wield that 2/3 of the vote. Let me also give you a sense about legislation and what happens when a bill's introduced. So in the last full session, I don't have the 2021-2022 numbers yet. There were almost 5,000 bills were introduced in that 2-year session. And you can see the percentages. You know, 54% of the bills introduced did not make it out of the Senate. Or 54% passed. So, you know, 46% did not make it out of the Senate. You know, in the Assembly, it was even tighter in terms of what gets out of its own house. So you do all the work, you find a legislator, they introduce your bill, you have a 50-50 chance of getting out of just the first house. Now we're going to start talking about archaic made-up terms. Who can tell me, and this may be some of the folks that I've trained in the past, what does enrolled mean? Either chat it or come off mute. What does it mean when a bill has been enrolled? I'm a failure as a teacher.
Does that mean that it's been introduced and accepted by the legislators, or does that just mean that it's just been proposed?
What it means is when a bill has been enrolled, it means that it's passed both houses and it's on its way to the governor. So enrolled means both houses have passed it, and it's going to now go to the governor's desk. Who can tell me what's chaptered? When a bill has been chaptered, you got to understand the archaic terms, or you're going to be lost.
Help me out, Marge. I'm a newcomer.
There's lots of folks on the call. I'm pretty sure somebody can come up with it. What does chaptered mean? So think about it in terms of the state law is actually a bunch of chapters, right? And so when a bill's been chaptered, it means the governor has signed it, has approved it, and the secretary has literally put the bill in the chapter in the state law. So that's what chaptered means. So you'll hear these terms. I'm going to, have other terms for you as well. Enrolled means it's passed both houses. So you can see these percentages, in both the Senate and the Assembly. 70% of bills introduced don't make it to the governor's desk. Okay. And the governor vetoes about 5%, or he did during this 2-year terms, vetoed about 5% of bills. So never forget about resolutions either. You'll see when you look at bill numbers, you'll see SB, that stands for Senate bill, AB, that stands for Assembly bill. That means they were introduced in the Senate, SB, or the Assembly, AB. There are resolutions, and I don't think we use the resolution process as much as we could. Concurrent resolutions are both the Assembly and the Senate have agreed on a position about an issue. And so it's a statement of, agreement for the legislature. The joint resolutions, I think, are really interesting. So this is passed by, again, both the Assembly and the Senate. Don't need governor's signature on these, by the way. These are just about the two houses. So a joint resolution is something that the California state legislature wants to say to Congress. And this is given to all of our congressional representatives. So, for instance, the Congress just passed a military bill that included,
burn stacks.
Yeah, included a lot of stuff we wouldn't want in there. And if, we could get a joint resolution saying, that our state does not want, the military budget to increase, those kind of things. It's not binding by law, but it is a statement that can sometimes be helpful for advocates. And then there are things called AR and SR, and those are basically just internal House resolutions. So when you start looking at legislation and you see different letters besides SB and AB, think about, is that a resolution? Great question about, can a bill be chaptered but not signed by the governor? That's such a great question.
Right.
So, can a bill become law without the governor's signature? It can. I think the last time it happened, I don't think I was even a twinkle in my mother's eye. The last time a governor let a bill, become law without a signature or veto decades and decades and decades ago. You know, I think most governors like to be able to say, you know, they have an opinion. You know, their ability to let a bill become law without their signatures is not very high. Question regarding suspense file. Great, Jess. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. Yeah, we'll come up to that. So, how a bill becomes a law. So if you go to the state legislature, you get this. And when I was starting in advocacy, I would look at this and I would be like, I don't understand what this is. And so, you know, that's why we created the Women's Policy Institute, and started training folks, because that is really horrible. I've always loved this comic. You know, it's like what the bill was is introduced, amended by the committee, it gets changed, amended on second reading, funded, cut off completely, and then the last, you know, piece on the lower right, you know, what was actually needed was a rope swing. So, you know, it is a horrible, challenging process. Meaning of table, Doug, I'll come back to that as well. So, and remind me when I'm talking about the committees. So, you know, there ought to be a law. Where does this come from? Anybody can have a bill idea. Citizens, advocates, you know, nonprofits, lobbyists, legislators, state agencies, many, you know, bill ideas can come from anywhere. You see a problem in your community and you think that should be a solution, you should start talking to policymakers. And by that, I mean staff. Hey, you know, I'm seeing, you know, XYZ happening. Can we, you know, have a law on to fix that? That's where ideas come from. Now, we need to make sure your idea is well cooked, but, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, that there isn't some secret, you know, organization of policy idea people in Sacramento where bill ideas come from. So anybody can have a bill idea. Now, what do you do with it? Where do you go? Usually fall is best. The legislature just ended its 2-year session. And so now, you know, people are taking a breath and you know, getting their offices organized again. But staff are going to be ready to start hearing from folks about bill ideas. Fall is usually the best time to go in and talk to folks. So, you know, how do you, like, do you write the bill? Do you actually have to, like, know all of the legalese? You do not. You go into a legislative office and you know, share your bill idea, and the next session, the next training, I'm going to show you a sample of a form that you can use. You go in, talk to the staff person. They like the idea. They will send that to the Office of Legislative Counsel, also called Leg Counsel, and those are the lawyers who will draft the legislation. So you don't need to know all of the legalese. Now we start talking about deadlines. So bill drafting deadline is the 3rd Friday in January. So you have between now and the 3rd Friday in January to have a bill idea accepted by a legislator so that it can go to Leg Counsel to be drafted. The bills are then, after they're drafted and you've approved of them as sponsor, then they are introduced. So if you're not running your own legislation, just know between now and, you know, the 3rd Friday in January, a lot of organizations we support are starting this process and talking with folks and looking at you know, what kind of things can be introduced. How to find a bill author. So there's, you know, a lot of them, as you saw. A lot of them are Democrats, as you saw. So how do you pick which one you go to with your bill idea? Research which legislators would be good for your bill idea is the best way to do it. So one is certainly knowledge. You know, it is important to have a bill author who understands the topic. you know, that your bill would be dealing with. If you're looking at criminal justice issues, those type of things, you want to find an author who knows that field pretty well. They're the ones who have to convince their colleagues to approve the bill. They're the ones who have to speak in hearings about the bill. And it's really kind of painful sometimes. I've seen it where legislators who don't really understand what bill they're talking about, you know, are taking questions during a committee hearing. You know, it's important to find someone who's knowledgeable. It's really helpful to find somebody who has positional power. So if your author, you know, is a chair of a committee that your bill may go through, that's really important. The other thing that makes positional power better is that if somebody has, especially like a committee chairpersonship, other legislators treat that person really well because they want their bills to be passed by that committee. So positional power is not just I have a bill and I'm you know going to make it go through, but it's also everybody else is going to look at me and treat me well because they want their bills to go through. So positional power is really important. Personal power is really important. And this, you talk to other advocates primarily. The person you want to go to, do they have a good relationship with others? Are they considered a good legislator? Not all of the legislators are good legislators. Some of them are really hard to work with. I've seen some that wanted nothing to do with community members, wouldn't accept co-authors on any of their bills because they were just running them by themselves. So personal power is really important. And, you know, a legislator who is committed to the issue. You know, each author carries and their the leadership in their house will tell them how many bills they can introduce in each 2-year session. So they're capped. Not everybody gets to introduce 200. It's usually capped at much lower than that. You know, they've got a lot of bills they're working, and you need to find out, is the person you're going to be committed to your bill, so that you know, they're pushing to make sure. Capital staff are always looking for ideas. So, you know, you look on the website, I'm going to give you that website. You call the office to speak to a staff person. All of the capital offices, the staff are broken out into issue areas. So if you were to call a capital office of a legislator and ask, you know, who in your office works on environmental bills, there's usually a staff person who has that focus, and then you're talking to that person you know, asking, are they interested in any bills? You've got a bill idea, you'd like to talk to them. Remember that district staff handle constituent concerns, not legislation. So some advocates are like, I'm going to go talk to the district staff. Pretty much the district staff are handling problems in the district for constituents. They're not involved in legislation. Where they are helpful at times is they can help get a meeting set up for you with a legislator in the district office. And this is, again, the time to do that, is, you know, after the session. So if you wanted to meet with a legislator directly, you can call the district staff and say, hey, when is the member going to be in the district? I'd like to have a meeting with that person, and then the district staff can help set that up, and you don't have to travel. The other thing when you're starting the process of legislation, and again, this goes for if you want to run your own bill, as well as, again, remembering what other advocates should be doing if you're in coalition or working with other advocates, is starting to interact with the administration. It's really important to call the governor's office with your bill idea, let them know that you're thinking of, you know, thinking of having a bill introduced. The governor's office is also set up with people with expertise in specific areas. So if you wanted to call the governor's office and talk to somebody who's in charge of reproductive health, they would have a health person who has expertise in reproductive health talk to you. So all of the legislative offices and all the governor's offices are set up with staff that have specific interests. If you're really working on a bill, you're then going to be working with the agency that will administer the bill, the Department of Finance, if there is a cost to the bill, and the governor's policy staff, as I said. Just so you know, there's a lot of behind the scenes backdoor stuff that goes on. So all of the bills that are introduced, the agency that would be impacted by your bill sends an analysis and recommendation on all bills in their jurisdiction to the governor. These are not public. So you have no idea if you're doing something in criminal justice. You have no idea what CDR, is that right? The corrections department. You have no idea what they're saying about your bill to the governor. Now, the governor doesn't always agree with the agency's analysis, but they always send an analysis, and it is never public, which is really unfortunate and wrong. So another note about bill introduction, sometimes you'll hear from advocates, yeah, we've got a spot bill, that type of thing. So everything's in deadlines. You saw the deadline for getting your draft language to Leg Council through a legislator was the third Friday in January. Bill introduction also has a deadline. If you're not going to make those deadlines, but you have a friendly legislator, they can actually put in what's called a spot bill. So it's a blank bill. And then you can amend your language into the bill in February and March. So there are deadlines, and then there are things that don't make the deadlines, but you're still able to do it. So we had a saying in the Women's Policy Institute that a bill's not dead until it's dead, and then even then it's not dead. So there's always ways to revive bills. There's always ways to get bills in past deadlines, that type of thing. And then sometimes you might have a friendly legislator and they know they don't want to work in your area, but they're willing to put in what's called an unbacked spot bill. So this is a blank bill, you get a bill number, but it doesn't have an author's name on it, and it doesn't have any information about the bill in it. So you're just waiting to find an author and waiting to get bill language introduced. So third Friday in February is the bill introduction deadline, and the bill goes to the House of Origin. So when I say the House of Origin, if you have a senator, it goes to the Senate, and if you have an assembly person, it goes to the Assembly. The first thing that happens to the bill is it goes to a committee, goes to what's called a Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee refers the bill to what they call the Committee of Jurisdiction. So the committee that knows enough about your topic that they can actually consider your bill. One of the things that can happen is the Rules Committee can refer your bill to multiple committees. That's called double referred or triple referred. If you hear from an advocate, yes, we got the bill introduced, it's been double referred, that means that they have to go through two policy committees in the same period of time that most bills go through one policy committee. So it can sometimes be really challenging and can sometimes be unfair to the bill because things have to move so quickly. The policy committees are the first committees to receive and hear your bills, and they have between March and May to get a hearing set up, review your bill, and take action on your bill. Each house has its own calendar. So in early January, go on the Senate side, go on the Assembly side. The dates are roughly the same, but you want to just pay particular attention to any differences between the two calendars. These are the policy committees. So, there are a lot of committees, and that means that legislators are very busy. And so when your bill gets referred by the Rules Committee to a policy committee, these are the types of names of committees that your bill has been referred to. The reason that the Rules Committee might do a double referral or a triple referral is if your bill has to do with two kind of different issues. So for example, the bill that we worked on that was the medication abortion bill in student health centers in UC and CSU campuses, that got double referred to the Committee on Education because it's the campuses, it's in the UC and CSU, and also the Health Committee because it's about medication abortion, which is a health issue. So that's how that double refer works. For the policy committees, and you're going to hear me repeat this so many times, each committee has its own office and staff, and it's overseen by whoever the committee chair is. So a senator or assembly person that has their own office with their staff, if they're a chair of a committee, they actually have two offices in the Capitol. They have their own legislative office, and then they have their committee office. So they manage staff in both of those offices. They're different staff, they're not the same staff. The staff are broken out just like the governor's office, just like the legislator's own legislative office. Staff have particular expertise in particular areas. So if you were calling a committee for any reason and wanted to talk to a staff person, you'd say, who is the staff person who handles criminal justice issues or environmental justice issues, that type of thing. And the staff are assigned based on those areas. Staff are very important in the policy committees. Staff are responsible for writing the bill analysis that the committee members are going to read. They're very important because they include ideas of where amendments could be made. They include an analysis of what other state law is regarding the issue you're working on. They also include usually whether legislation has been tried like this before, and what those bill numbers were and what happened to that legislation. It's important to know that the committee staff writing that bill analysis needs to be handled well and quickly. You want to call the committee the bill was assigned to. Again, you ask who's assigned to manage that bill. You want to get them information about the bill. You want to, before the committee hears your bill and the committee analysis is done, you want to upload your letter of support or opposition. There are sometimes now, I know that the committees are moving towards this main portal where you can upload your bill. But I think some committees are still using their own portal. So when you call, you want to ask, which portal are you using? How do I upload my my letter of support or opposition? And also ask for the deadline for when you're going to upload your letter, and it will be in the committee analysis. Vanessa, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to add that for the support letters, whether they're supporting or opposing, it's all through one system, which is a California Legislature position letter portal.
Yeah.
And then the portal, it'll identify once you put an AB or SB law, which committee it would be referred to. And so you should know which committee you're going to send it to, or if it's an amended version or previous amendment. So you should be clear about that, and you can establish an account there.
Yes, so I was actually going to show that, but I do know of at least one committee that isn't using that main portal. Like I said, I think most are, but you just want to check with the committee and make sure you know where the letters of support or opposition go.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for adding that. And anybody who has experience in the legislature, please, if I say something incorrectly or you want to add to anything, we're all doing this together. So every organization and individual on this call should set up your own account with the California Legislature Position Letter Portal. So you can see that San Francisco Bay Physicians for Social Responsibility has an account. And so when there are legislation that we're supporting or opposing, we can go in and hit submit a bill. And as was just said, you have to know the bill letters, AB, or whether it's a resolution, the bill number, regular session type versus the legislature can come into session in other types, but regular is most often. You'll search and then you'll be able to upload upload your bill. So it was a fairly easy registration process. We just did it. We had been mostly signing on to other support letters, but it's a pretty easy process. Individuals can also do this. So if you as an individual want to speak out or for or oppose legislation, you should also complete a registration for you as an individual. So let me go back. Great, thank you, Vanessa, for putting that in the chat. Let me, Vanessa, do you know? I mean, my assumption, how it had always been, was that that you had to put a new letter in for each committee. And I meant to ask one of my colleagues that, but that's still true, correct?
I believe so. It depends on, yeah, as you process it, are you saying if it's doubled or referred, then you have to do a letter for that committee and another committee?
Right, and then a
Typically,
separate letter for appropriations as well?
Correct, and
Yep,
usually
that's what I thought.
it's very similar. It's just updated as applicable to each process of the legislative process.
Yeah. So a lot of organizations don't realize this, and so they'll send a letter of support in the beginning of the legislative process to the first policy committee, and then they're like, okay, I supported the bill. But each committee needs its own separate letter because it's focused on something different. So if you, like for the medication abortion bill, the health committee, you want your letter to talk about the health safety of medication abortion, why it's how safe it is, blah blah blah. And then the education committee, you want to talk about why universities and places of education should provide this for their students, what the impact for students is of being able to determine when and if they have children, that kind of thing. So each committee has a different kind of perspective, and they want you to address that perspective. And so they don't want just a copied same old letter. So if you're supporting or opposing legislation, really make sure that means you're going to have to be submitting letters throughout the legislative session. So I got kind of lost where I am. Committee hearings, so submit a letter opposition before the hearing, ask the staff for the deadline. How the committee hearings usually work is the author's office usually decides who gives testimony in support of their bill during the hearing. Usually it's 2 people. Then the committee also allows what's called Me Too's, which after the presentations, the testimony have been given, you're able to then sign up to be able to say, in the old days when they were in person, you stood in line in front of a microphone. I'm not exactly sure how it happens in these virtual committee hearings. Bob, I know you've done Me Too's in the virtual ones. How do you let them know you want to give a Me Too? Do you remember?
I've usually been, the reality is I'm just looking on my email too much, but things will come through. So for us, we're at least officially registered working through the Green California Coalition, where a lot of this stuff gets vetted. So usually, just because of our own capacity issues, I really rely on interested coalition partners and others to outreach to us, and then we will try to do the Me Too. But could I ask you a question in regard to Do they really matter? They always seem so rote. You're calling in for 3 seconds, and can you really show up and do it? And you know, I've tried to do it when I can, but it seems a little ancillary. So is that really counted?
Yeah, and I just want to appreciate everybody who's throwing in, you know, your own information about this. So this is great. There's a phone number, I guess, and operator unmutes you, your line, you're able to give your Me Too. You know, I have seen it be effective in certain times. And I need to watch some committee hearings or be prepared this year to see some of the virtual hearings. In the old days, when you signed up at the microphone, when you stood at the microphone, you know, for instance, the abortion bill, it was out into the hallway of students from universities doing their Me Too's. And you could see some of the more moderate Dems in those moments kind of look up and see, you know, okay, Me Too's for support of the bill. 3/4 of the committee hearing stood up and stood in line waiting to give the Me Too. You could see the moderate Democrats kind of looking like, oh, holy turds, like this is going to be really, I better come around here, right? And so those I think are really positive, really powerful. And then the other ways that I have seen them be very powerful is who gives the Me Too. You know, there's power in the state, and in terms of like health issues, if the California Medical Association is one of the Me Too's, if the California Nurses Association is one of the Me Too's, right? So you've got power in numbers, and you've got power in, you know, organizational power, and those Me Too's can sometimes solidify where people are at with their, you know, how they're going to vote on a bill. It does feel rote, and I think probably 75% of the time it doesn't really matter. But if it's a controversial bill and there's enough of you, it matters. Or if there is enough of the right organizations, it matters.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think so your lobbying committees, you're doing the Me Too. Great. Everybody keep throwing in what you know. This is great. We'll so folks can be learning from everybody on this. So in the committee, if there is a quorum present, they will take the vote in the hearing. Usually, they can table the bill and not vote on it. This was a question that was asked earlier. That is sometimes just because maybe they need amendments from the author or some more information, or they're trying to kill your bill, but they're not ready to take a vote on it. If you're really working on a bill and you get into a committee hearing and there's 2 people there and they say, okay, we're going to start the hearing, and there's not enough to take a quorum, you have to just go ahead and do it. I mean, it's really for advocates, it can be really, really challenging that not all of the committee is present. But you know, once there's a quorum, they will usually take a vote. Committees can, policy committees can recommend amendments. And the fact is, this was hard for me as an advocate to understand. When you have your bill idea and you get a legislator to introduce it, they now control your idea, and they can actually make amendments to your idea, to your bill, without even asking permission, even if you're a sponsor. And we've seen this happen, and it is devastating, because you as the advocate have to really decide, like, am I going to continue supporting this bill? Now, you know, what keeps them from doing it a lot is it would look really bad if you went from support to opposition, you know, on your own bill, right? But we've seen it, and we've seen authors do that. Once the bill is being heard by a committee, it is now owned by the committee. So the committee can make any amendments that it wants to the bill. Policy committees usually try to play nice with the author and suggest recommendations. They don't force amendments, but they have the right. Once the bill is in the committee, the committee can do whatever it wants to that bill. So it can take amendments and make changes to your bill. And then, the vote, and again, archaic language, to people have a sense of what do pass means. The committee decides whether it will do pass your bill. Means it's approved it. It means it said yes. Majority wins. So do pass, if you hear that, oh, we were in committee, we got to do pass, it means the bill was passed. And again, the committee can hold the bill indefinitely. It can hold it for a particular issue that's nice, or it can vote no and defeat your bill. If your bill is defeated, it can come up to automatic rehearing. Does anybody remember exactly what that language is? It's not rehearing, but your bill gets to automatically be reheard by the committee and re-voted on by the committee. So even if your bill is defeated, there's still life. You can still, and then you spend that time to get some of your votes to be able to pass your bill. So after do pass from policy committee, if you have any financial costs to the state, you go to appropriations. Usually appropriations has a benchmark of how much money your bill would have to cost. No, I don't mean defeated, Vanessa. I mean, if you're in a committee and your bill was voted down, you get to have it reheard. And I just can't remember what that word is. But anyway, I think I'm clear. So appropriations committee, if your bill is going to cost, they'll do the analysis of your bill, what it's going to cost. If it costs a certain amount, it's going to be heard by the appropriations committee, usually in May, and then to the floor vote in May. So remember I said about 50% of bills don't make it through the House of Origin, right? You can see how fast it is once you introduce legislation. You are running from January to May to keep up with the timeline and the process, and to make sure that your bill gets approved by a policy committee, gets approved by the appropriations committee and the floor. So a little bit about appropriations committee. It's supposed to focus just on costs. If you have a controversial bill like an abortion bill, trust me, they're not just going to talk about costs. They're going to talk about everything to do with the bill, but they're supposed to just focus on costs. Again, committee staff has expertise, specific issue area expertise. So there's a health person on the appropriations committee, there's an environmental person on the appropriations committee, and so they are doing the analysis. They're going to figure out how much your bill idea is going to cost, and they often need your help and support. So you want to keep your costs low. They're hearing from the departments and agencies that are going to be implementing your bill that your bill is going to bankrupt the state. And that's how it works, right? So, the one thing I've learned through all of this around appropriations committee is no staff person wants to be the one who estimates your bill incorrectly. Can you imagine the staff person in the appropriations committee says, oh, this is only going to cost 10 million. And 3 years later, it actually cost 100 million, right? And so the pressure on them is to actually increase the estimate because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be the staff person who approved something that actually ended up costing a lot more. So you need to get them information that will help them get a good estimate, but keep it realistic. The analyses are usually very short. And it doesn't usually include supporters, although you still want to put in your letters of support. And maybe now with this new portal, they can do that. Hearings for appropriations are usually pretty fast. Oftentimes authors will waive the hearing if they feel like the committee is going to support their bill and the analysis seems to be coming out like it's going to be fair. Sometimes the author will waive the hearing because they really don't want to mess things up. which can happen sometimes. Again, the committee can amend the bill without author or sponsor's approval. Usually they do that to lower the cost. And, you know, again, you're the sponsor and you're like, you know, what do you mean they just took out the mandate? Which that's what this committee can do. And so the other thing that happens is there's this thing called a suspense file. So somebody asked about the suspense file earlier. Here's how the suspense file works. If your bill is over a certain amount, they set that each year. You may have a hearing, your bill, you know, gets the committee analysis, and then it goes to what's called a suspense file. And what happens at that point is mysterious and boggles my mind. So the Appropriations Committee basically will have a deadline to review all bills. By that deadline, the members of the committee will give the committee chair a list of which bills they are prioritizing. So they'll be told, give me a list of your top 5 bills or your top 10 bills. The committee chair takes all of the priorities and you know, looks at those first, and then the decision is made by the chair and the leader of the other house. So, if the chair is a Democrat, then the other decision will be made by the head of the Republican Party. So it's, I should have said of the other party. On the day of the deadline for bills to pass appropriations, they will have a hearing, but they don't allow anything to happen during that hearing. It's basically the secretary, sometimes the chair, but usually the secretary, who will announce whether bills pass. And they will do it by saying A, roll call, B, roll call, or held in committee. That's in the assembly, they at least tell you held in committee. In the Senate, they used to be silent. They would just not say anything when your bill was read. A, roll call means both Republicans and Democrats have voted yes for it. B, roll call means that it's Dems only or the majority party only. So that's the Appropriations Committee. You wait, you watch on TV, and your bill number will be read, and they'll say A, roll call, B, roll call, or held. And that you won't know until all of the voting is posted who voted for what. Then it goes to the floor. Usually the first policy committee or the policy committee is responsible for writing up the floor analysis. So if anything's happened from the policy committee to the floor, you want to talk to the staff member who's going to write that floor analysis and update them, make sure that they know what things have changed in the bill. The author's office will be able to, the author will be able to have a statement on the floor. You want to ask them, your author's office, if they want help with writing up that floor statement. So another question, and held in committee bills, are those considered after the budget is passed? No, appropriations bills aren't really affected by the budget. The appropriations bills in the legislature, the bills that pass, the regular bills that pass in the legislature, those start the January of the following year. So the cost of those bills will only be absorbed the following January, and the budget is being passed to start July 1st. So the Appropriations Committee and the Budget Committees don't really work in the same area, and they don't work on the same bills. So you'll, as an advocate, want to do what's called a floor alert, which is a one-page flyer on what your bill does, arguments in support, that type of thing, and you'll want to lobby offices. So then once you get through the first house, and again, 50% pass the first house, now you're in the opposite house. So if you started as a Senate bill, you're now in what's called the opposite house in the assembly. You are going through Rules Committee, you're going through the Policy Committee. If it's been double referred in the first house, it's usually double referred in the second, Appropriations Committee, and the floor. And again, you have a short period of time to do that. So I say it's the same but different. What's different about the second house is they don't love you as much. So in the Senate, senators try to be kind to other senators. In the Assembly, they try to be kind to all of their other Assembly persons. But once a Senate bill comes to the Assembly and an Assembly bill goes to the Senate, there's a little bit of like, I don't owe your author as much. So the power moves are different. And they don't know the other legislator as well usually. And the other pressure on that opposite house is that they're kind of the last stop sign before your bill goes to the governor. So they take themselves a little bit more, kind of their responsibility is to stop bills going to the governor's desk. So if there's been amendments made between the two houses, it has to go through a process called concurrence, and any changes within each house, kind of that has to be agreed upon by the committees the bills already passed through. If there were changes made in the second house, the first house has to concur, and then once passed out of the second house, goes to the governor's desk. So as I said, the governor can sign, which means it's chaptered into state law. They can veto, 2/3 override of the legislature to override a veto. And as I said, let bill become a law. I said LOL because that hardly ever happens. Great. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about the state budget. I'm trying to push like 3 hours of a lecture into an hour and 15 minutes. So, but I think it is important to understand the budget and understand what's different about the budget than regular bills. So first is to understand the economy of California. The blue is general fund money, so that's money that California gets to spend. Orange is special funds, gray is bonds, those are usually directed, and then yellow is federal funds, and again, those are usually like you have to spend the money in this or that. So you can see the blue has been increasing. Those are funds that the state has some ability to decide what's most important to them, and so you can see that has been increasing year after year. So the legislative cycle, if you remember, goes from January to September, and the state budget cycle, however, really starts kind of in a different place. It starts in July, but it's introduced in January. So the budget bill itself is really worked on in the legislature from January until June. So, just so you know how the budget is working right now, the governor's office has sent guidelines to all the agencies to tell them how they can submit their requests, their budget requests. The agencies then begin submitting those and making a case with the governor for those. The governor finalizes the budget recommendations by the end of the year, beginning of January, and submits the budget to the legislature in January. The budget is heard by completely different committees. They're heard by budget committees that also focus on issues, specific issues like healthcare, education, those type of things. So if you want to affect the budget, you've got to understand the budget committees and which budget committee is working on an issue that you're interested in. So the sub-budget committees meet, then the big budget committee meets, and through those months, it's very fast, and you've got to kind of be ready for the movement of the budget. In May, the governor submits what's called a May revised budget. So he, submits his first budget idea in January and then revises it in May. He does that because tax monies have started coming in. So the governor knows by May how many, what the tax monies are going to be for the state and how much money they can spend. September, November, it says agency hearings held. Who holds those hearings? Are they public? Agency hearings. Those are not public. Those are, what are those in California? I'm gonna have to look that up. Dominique. And agency hearings are held. I got this from NASPO. I'm not sure what those agency hearings are. Somebody can look that up, or I will look that up. Bob, thanks for answering that question about AB bills. So yes, AB is Assembly bill, SB is Senate bill, and they can work on a wide, each Senate and Assembly can work on a wide variety of legislation. So the budget package, another difference is the budget is the only legislation. It is a bill. It's the only legislation that starts in both houses at the same time. So most bills either start in the Senate or start in the Assembly. The budget bill starts in both the Senate and the Assembly at the same time. There are 2 budget committees and multiple subcommittees. So there's a Senate Budget Committee and Assembly Budget Committee. Senate has 5 subcommittees, the Assembly has 6. The budget package consists of, basically a budget bill and then what's called budget trailer bills. So if you hear that language, somebody says, well, we need to get that into the budget trailer bill. Think of it this way, especially those of you who are not nonprofit folks. The budget is like a spreadsheet. It's really just numbers. And the trailer bill explains how to spend those numbers, right? So there might be a recycling, an amount in the budget for improving recycling, and it'll just say, to this agency to improve recycling, and then the budget trailer bill, which is a separate bill, will say this is how you are supposed to improve recycling. This agency will do X, Y, Z. So you've got the budget, which is just numbers, and you've got the trailer bill, which tells the state how to spend the money that's in the spreadsheet. So I want to end with a little bit on kind of why some bills pass and some fail. This is going to be a part of the next webinar where we're going to talk more about language, more about kind of how you advocate for bills, both in writing as well as verbally. So there's a theory that I have grown to be very fond of and I think is accurate, and that is that policymakers must agree on 3 things. 1, that there is a problem. 2, that there is a solution to the problem. And 3 is that it's important or okay to solve the problem. If they don't agree on all 3 of these things, your bill does not have a very good chance of getting passed, right? So when you're preparing as an advocate, and you'll get these slides so you can see in more depth, but you really have to take a look at what the problem is and how do you know it's a problem. And I always say statistics and stories. You want data as much as you can, and you want real stories from real people. I love in the chat, Jess, yes, trailer bills, the whole budget process doesn't follow the deadlines of the regular legislature. So you need to focus on the deadlines of the budget process. So first is to really figure out what the problem is, and here's some ideas of where you can get information about the problem. And then, researching the policy options is so, you really, when you go in and say, I have a bill idea, it's really good to know what your option is. but you also need to understand other options, and you need to understand whether California's tried something like that before, that type of thing. And so you can do some research on that, and then researching political will. How much will it cost is a huge part of political will. What do constituents think about the problem and the solution is political will. If you've got information about how constituents might feel about your particular issue, that means votes for a legislator. So it's important to have that information available. So a couple of caveats. You have to be the expert on your issue. You really have to know in depth what the problem is you're trying to solve, what the potential solutions are that you're that could solve the problem. And the reason you have to understand all the potential solutions is somebody is going to mention another solution to your problem, and you need to have the information ready that why that isn't going to help solve that problem. And so, make sure that you do have all of the information, but you don't have to act like a know-it-all. And you don't have to share all the information. You just have to have it, because you need to understand that policymakers need money and votes. And so they want to know, what constituents think about things. And policy staffers need less work. So you want to be the expert, but don't share everything, because that will overwhelm the staff. Don't ever get thrown off if you're ever told, no, we can't do that, or that will never happen, or, that's not possible. Because what one person says is not possible, another person sees possibility. So don't ever get thrown off by somebody saying no to you. Do your research before you approach, and offer support to the folks you need to support you, especially the staffers. Some of the best relationships between advocates and staff are when a staff person contacts you and says, I know this isn't what your bill is about, but you seem to know this issue. I've got this other problem, what can you tell me about it? And being able to support that staffer. A couple of other caveats: be careful if it's in writing, it's public. You have to decide when you're emailing a staffer, or when you should pick up a phone and talk to the person. So any communication with the government at all, somebody can discover through Freedom of Information Act. The walls are thin. There's a lot of tangle between the legislature and the administration, but they also have to work together. So you need to not pit one over against the other, but try to work with them. Leveraging allies, advocacy groups, funders. The medication abortion bill probably would not have passed had we not had the funding to implement it. So sometimes whatever issue you have that you want a solution to, if you have the funding for it, that also helps. And don't be mean. Treat everyone with respect, especially the receptionists, because when you call the office, they're going to be able to help you find somebody that you need to talk to. So, and their job really stinks. I've seen them treated really badly by some lobbyists. So just be nice to everybody. And reputations are currency. So, when you say you're going to get something done or get information, make sure that you do. If you flake, it's going to be really hard for you to keep your reputation going. So here are a bunch of resources. I know we're at almost at time, but I showed you the position letter portal. I do want to say, so this info legislature, if you've got bills that you've been hearing about or looking up, go to that and look at the committee analyses if you haven't done that. That is probably the best place to do research on a bill idea, because you'll be able to see from the committee staff, what they think of it, what research they've found, whether it's been tried in the past or not. It's really a goldmine of information. And then when you're in the Capitol, whatever you do, never touch the bear. This is called, this is outside of the governor's office, and it's called bacteria bear for a reason. I mean, look at the kid sticking his finger up the bear's nose. This is just not okay. As a public health person, I felt like I really needed to warn you to just never touch the bear. So don't touch the bear. All right, folks. Julie, get us out of here. I want to thank everybody. We're going to send you the link to this video. I will answer some of the questions that came up in the chat that I didn't get a chance to answer, or I didn't answer correctly. I will fix some of those. We'll send that information out to everybody who is on this call. Love to see you in the next session. We're really going to again talk about language, talk about how you can present your idea, and go from, now you know the background. We're going to go from there in how to get a bill passed. Okay. So Julie, anything else we want to say?
Just want to say thank you, Marge. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Keep your eyes out, watch your email for both the email with the recording of tonight and also the link for Thursday, September 1st will be the second session. So keep your eyes out for that reminder email, and check us out at SFA PSR, sfapsr.org. We hope you'll check out our other programs and activities and projects and actions. And thank you, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Don't touch the bear.